and welcome back to another episode of Oath Keepers Hawaii. My name is Minister Lee, and I'm down here today with my good friend, Mr. Ghilardi. Mr. Ghilardi, could you share with the folks at home a little bit about your background in the law and how long you've been practicing? Just a little bit of bio for the folks at home.
Okay, I think we've done that before, but I'll say my name is William Ghilardi. I've been practicing law in Honolulu for over 35 years. Had a practice at one time that was nothing but representing banks. And I specialized actually in doing foreclosures.
Foreclosure specialist.
And about 6 or 7 years ago, I had a life-changing experience and reevaluated what I'm doing and decided I'd switch sides.
Oh, so, praise God. Good for you guys. Good for you guys.
So now I take care of people that are being foreclosed upon.
Yes.
Helping them get through the terror of a foreclosure.
And I'm here today not just as somebody who's a minister trying to spread the word that there are people who are out there that can help you, but I'm also a client. I've experienced this, and I actually have worked, volunteered in a law firm too, and helped the intake of people who are going through this. So I know firsthand. Literally, I had the very first lady I met. She was sitting in the lobby like this, and she said, "I feel like I'm having heart palpitations. I'm going to die." And it is terrorizing.
It is terrorizing.
It's absolutely terrorizing, and it's the fact that the banks have gotten away with this for so long when there's all different ways to help people work it out. And that's why I'm so excited about meeting you, is that you've shared with me, but we're going to share with the folks today at home. There's all kinds of different solutions. But I know most people, because of the terror, the heart palpitations, and they can't even think straight. So the bottom line is you do need help. I fought this on my own, studying for 6 years on my own, but I found that the biggest trick of all is that you have no voice really in the courts unless you have a bar attorney for you. And it's really frustrating because you think that we have a justice system that will actually listen to your facts and evidence, but it just hasn't been my experience. So very grateful, very, very grateful that I found Mr. Ghilardi. So maybe you can share a little bit about the specialties and some of the things that you guys can do to modify or bankruptcy or just the different things. But I think modification.
We do start up with simply just getting involved in the lawsuit with the foreclosure. The legal system and the rules of court are complicated. They're complicated because they have to be. If you don't have some kind of rules when you're in a courtroom, it'll turn into chaos. I've certainly seen that happen. And so the courts over the many hundreds of years have come up with rules of court. That's who gets to speak first, who gets to speak second, so people can't speak over each other. And it's, the frustration of this being in any kind of an argument if you can't get your
point across,
So, and then we do that. We defend in many of these cases these what we used to call predatory loans, are loans that were made that should never have been made. And they are at odd ways of doing things. In fact, there were some that, for instance, you could at one time write out how much money you made, whether you made that much money or not.
Right.
And the banks would make loans on that. And sometimes they'd look at it and they'd say, okay, you're going to start out at a payment of $500 a month. Well, just the basic interest on the loan is $1,000 a month. So that what would be happening is, unbeknownst to you, you have what we call negative amortization. In other words, the balance of your loan is going up instead of going down. That was just one.
Just to me, just right there, it sounds like that. It's a trick. It's it's like you're saying predatory. It's like beyond. It should be so illegal. They should have never even been allowed to exist in the first place.
Well, the funny thing was, it was actually very much pushed by our government.
That doesn't surprise me.
Whether they were Democrats or Republican.
Right.
The idea was that we get more people in homes. Well, you get more people in homes, but then you get a lot of people in trouble.
It's crazy. I mean, it really is crazy, and it's and I've seen the movies that our friend had sent me.
Mhm.
That the movies, I think it was called 99 Homes. Did you
Right,
see that?
yeah, mhm. I didn't see it.
Oh my gosh! It was like the trailer alone. They come to your door, just like the mafia. You have a half an hour to get out, and like get all your whole life, and you have nowhere to go, and you're already. It's just, I mean, the tragedy of how we treat human beings on this planet is just. It's just. I think we treat animals better than we treat each other. And so I just think it's a sin. So that's why I'm doing my part, is basically bringing the people to you so you can help them through this. It's like a maze of just.
No, there's many things you can do. First thing, there's the basic litigation review, where you try and find out whether or not the bank that's foreclosing you really has the right to do what they're doing. Do they really own the note? Has the note actually been paid off in some manner or form? And that's
If they
actually
have a release of mortgage in your bureau, doesn't that mean it's paid off?
it can if it was properly put in there.
Because I have, but even on my home, I have both of the house that is gone through the lawsuit and our other house. Both of them have releases of the mortgage that are in the Bureau of Conveyances. So I was wondering if it's
Well,
released.
if it's a legitimate release. We see some, at one time there were people who were going around and in this insurance defense thing, there's a lot of characters around who just they catch you in this situation where you're terrified and you'll do anything, and so they come and they tell you a story which may be actually impossible, but it sounds good when they talk to you about it. We've had some people where somebody will come and they'll say, okay, you give me $10,000, I'll make sure that your mortgage is gone in the next 5 years. And then they never hear from me again. Or another one was, you come give me $10,000, the person then wrote a check to the bank. It was no good. The bank released the mortgage after they got the check, and then the check bounced. And so there is a release, but of course the release is without any consideration, so it's probably not a valid release. And that's the kind of things that happen. So normally, if you pay off your mortgage, there's a release of the mortgage. It's very simple. But there's a lot of shysters out there, running around doing all kinds of crazy things.
Exactly. And how I even got myself, I had hired an attorney I saw off the news, like the TV. So you think it's a legitimate thing.
Right.
And I still don't know, because there's a lawsuit. There's a class action lawsuit about this law firm. But they had just basically had sent them all the different forms that you require, like tax returns and all that stuff, for over a year. And I would call and they'd route me around different departments, so I thought it was a pretty big law firm or something. One day I called, all those phone numbers were gone, and it was like they just were taking forever. I would never get any, like, what are you doing with the case, right? They would never let me know what was going on with the case. And then they disappeared. So then I went and filed a police report, and they said, oh, it's a civil matter, we can't help you. So I was like, oh my gosh. And then I hired 2 more people who had worked in loans, selling loans, as brokers and everything, but they were now doing modifications. And I got into trouble that way too. Spent all this money with people that didn't know what they were doing. So I'm just here to tell you guys, you really need an expert like Mr. Ghilardi. 35 years of concentrating on what he's done has made him an expert, whereas trying to go this alone, not only is it stressful and terrorizing going through any kind of bankruptcy or foreclosure or any kind of financial issues, because it's just scary, but the bottom line is, if you don't know what you're doing, it gets even more scary.
It really does. And I think one of the things we were going to talk about today was loan modifications.
Right. You like that alternative,
yeah.
right?
There's many alternatives in this. There's the litigation we've talked about. There's actually filing bankruptcies. There's a type of bankruptcy that will, get you out of liability for debts. At the same time, you can keep your home. It's actually called a Chapter 13. But again, you're in the courts, and it's something you cannot do yourself. Or you can, but it's really
It's
tough.
painstaking, and I've enjoyed studying. Actually, like you, I think you said when you first became a lawyer, it was so fascinating to you. I've really enjoyed.
It's still fascinating.
It's mind-boggling, but there's all kinds of different laws too. I mean, there's the admiralty law, then there's common law, which all the people think the whole world is based on common law because it makes common sense. But when you actually go into court, it's not the case, and it's like you said, so many rules. If you don't understand that, is
Admiralty
like,
law only involves shipping and things at sea.
I know it's supposed to, but I've been studying all this, and it's saying that admiralty law is actually what's running our courtrooms all over the country. I'll have to send you some stuff.
You'd have to.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, let's get back to this idea of a loan modification. For many years, the banks just plain refused to talk to anyone if they were in default.
Right.
The idea that they might help you with something that was just the farthest thing from their mind. They didn't do it.
They just wanted to resell the house and make more money.
They just didn't care, to be honest with you. I'm sure that was one of maybe the management people, but the everyday worker people, they just wanted to get rid of it. They just wanted to, get rid of the problem.
Get it off the books.
Get it off the books,
Wow.
so there was
but they don't think about the emotional attachment to what goes behind any of that. It's
absolutely not. They just that's not.
It's cold. It's really
very
cold.
Very cold. Now, what happened was, starting, as you know, we had what is called the Great Recession, which came in 2008. All of a sudden, there was a blossom a bloom of foreclosure.
Right.
And some lawyers kind of studied a little bit and started realizing that, hey, wait a minute. This is all screwed up because of what we called securitized loans. And
that's the derivative loans?
Yeah, that's where what would happen is you'd have countrywide, for instance, was one of the big companies that did all these predatory loans. Not particularly as much here, but all over the country.
Right.
And what they did was, they'd take the mortgages and they'd bundle them, and that means they'd put a whole bunch of mortgages together in a trust. And then they would sell the trust all over the world.
Oh my gosh, so who owns the titles or the notes? All over the world.
Yeah, and so it became...
That's crazy.
Well, but that's where the beginning of being able to defend these cases came from, because nobody was sure who had the note, who had the mortgage. Sometimes the note was one place, the mortgage was another. It's a little too complicated to explain here, but it began the defense mechanism. So as the defenses, the lawyers around the country started, stopping these foreclosures, and they started backing up in the courts. All of a sudden, the federal government got involved. And the basic idea of what these guys were talking about, these attorneys, was it might have such an incredible adverse effect on the economy.
Right.
If all of a sudden these billions and billions of dollars worth of mortgages aren't valid. So they paid some money off, and that's another story. But what happened was that all of a sudden, the mortgage companies very slowly, the banks very slowly, started to get a little more reasonable. Okay. Now, at first, it's still hectic in how you do it. But let's go see what your goal is. Your goal is, let's say you have a mortgage for $300,000.
Okay.
And you haven't paid on your mortgage for a couple of years.
Okay.
So let's say you not only owe the $300,000, you now owe another $25,000 in back payments that you haven't paid. So what your goal is to go to the bank. First thing, two things that you're trying to do. In some cases, they will forgive all the back interest. In some cases, they will take that interest and put it on the loan at the end. And in some cases, we've been able to get them to, in fact, many cases, most cases, we've been able to get them to lower the interest rate, at least temporarily. And so the problem is that trying to do this on your own is really hard.
Oh Lord, I'll
And,
tell you, it literally, not only is it stressful, my husband was just angry all the time, and it caused so much stress on our marriage. I mean, the kids were just like, oh gosh, and it's just after years of trying to get the solution to solve the problem, it was just, it's at some point you're kind of like, Lord, just what do I do? And it was really, truly a miracle when I found you guys. I just have to say that, because I was really up to I couldn't handle doing it on my own anymore. It's just too frustrating.
And that's the problem. A couple of things. This first thing is that you get a hold of the bank and you start talking to them. So if you're an individual, you talk to them and they'll tell you, okay, we need this. We need pay stubs. We need copies of your mortgage.
Right.
We need all kinds of things about your finance.
I did that for 2 years,
And so
every day.
And then so what would happen is you would send them all the stuff,
Yeah.
and then they'd lose it.
Not only would they lose it, they told me when my whole court thing started, I was in modification at the time. I was every day faxing those guys or scanning things over to them from the UPS store that they needed. And they'd say, oh, we have all docs in, and you'll get your mod within 24 to 48 hours. They told me that 3 times. And finally I kept feeling like, they're playing games with me, and this is my life, and so much of my life is dependent on finances, your house, your stability, and when that's threatened, everything in your whole world just becomes crazy. So yes, the country would have a big problem if all of this hit the fan at the same time.
Yeah, well,
And I think that's what they've been working to try to resolve, right?
well,
Because
it's well kind of go through the history of it, so where it is now. So that's what happened, just like you said. You'd give them all the stuff, and then they'd say, I need a little more, or they'd lose it. And the big problem was originally they didn't have any of their staff in these banks that concentrated in this particular area. Nobody knew what they were doing.
so they didn't have a plan of, okay, we made a mess, so we need to correct it.
Absolutely there was no plan.
Oh
And they'd
my
never done
gosh.
that before. As I told you, I represented banks for decades, and they just didn't look at it like that.
But think about it, because if this all goes down, then everybody can't really start over. What's going to happen? There would be mass chaos in society.
There's no question.
And it makes no sense to kick people out of the house, that they're the problem. The bank created this problem. They need to take some of the hit and let the people, for the once, didn't the American people bail out the banks? I think it's time for the banks to bail out the people.
Well, at any rate, so you went through this terrible problem. The first thing you had that problem with, the staff didn't know what they were doing. Okay, they literally didn't know what they were doing. And then you might get a good one that didn't know what they were doing.
Few and far between, I'm sure.
Yeah, but the problem was you are just simply a number on the screen.
Right.
You're not a person as far as they're
Right.
concerned. So there might be 100 people in the department, and you'll never get the same person twice.
Oh my gosh.
So it just again became chaos, and it was and we have a particular problem here in Hawaii. And I don't consider it a problem, but it's the demeanor of our people. We have a tendency here in Hawaii, and I've lived in Hawaii all my adult life, and my wife is Hawaiian, and all my children were born here, so I know Hawaii very well. And people from Hawaii have a tendency to be a bit more soft-spoken, and rather not trying to push hard. Now, people from the mainland are pushy, and that's the kind of push they expect. So when they get someone who doesn't push, they look at that as, I don't know if really a sign of weakness, but it was,
They're not going to fight them.
They're not going to fight you. So who cares? And so that was really a problem, and that's why so many people did. That's why if you tried it yourself, it became just almost impossible.
Right.
So basically what happened is eventually the bank started realizing, wait a minute, we're gonna have to do something about this. And then there was a tremendous amount of pressure from the federal government about, hey, you guys have gotta do something about this problem. And to some degree, they have. There's still lots of problems involved. But coming back to the loan modification, so they finally got to the point where at least the banks have some idea of what's going on, and they realize that they have to take care of this problem. So some banks still won't, but there's more and more that are willing to go into a loan modification. And again, there's a list of all kinds of documents that have to be shown. You have to be able to prove, for instance, that you can actually pay the money on the mortgage. In other words, if you're totally unemployed and it's a tragedy and stuff. For instance, the bank stopped foreclosing for a while. So because they became such a mess. In the old days, or not old days, not too long ago, we had what was called a non-judicial foreclosure, where they simply could just give you notice, publish it in the paper, and take your house away. In other words, there was no due process. You didn't have to go to court or anything like that. Now that's all gone. I mean,
I was going to say that's like so much damages, because that's a tort claim, because your soul, your body, this is your property that you walk around this planet in, is being threatened. I mean, it's really, really criminal, the stuff that goes on. It's just
no, there's no question.
wicked.
It's wicked stuff.
Really
At any rate,
bad.
so then they started making it a little easier to do, and then we started getting professionals involved. For instance, attorneys were allowed to do it. Real estate brokers were allowed to do it, and people who got a license to do it.
Is this to do the modifications?
Yeah, the licensed people that do it, there's very few of them that really actually get anything done.
I know, I've been through two.
Yeah.
I know.
And there's public agencies that do it, which basically don't do anything. I don't know how many they do, but I don't think.
You mean like the legal aid?
Well, not legal aid. That's a law.
They don't do it either.
No,
They won't touch it.
No, but there's things that have been set up for this nonprofit corporations that are government run that you can go to that will help you. The problem is that doesn't usually work very well.
Yeah.
So at any rate, let's keep moving forward. So finally it got where you need to go to the bank, talk to the bank, and in my case, we do that for you. And we have paralegals who specialize in this, and they have set up good relationships with each one of these banks. So they'll have somebody in the bank that they know that they can talk to, and just and that helps. But they still put you at the bottom of the pile if you don't get them all the documents on time. And that's a concept. They say, okay, here are all your documents. You need to get them there by January 31st. If you don't get them there by January 31st, then you're not
in the process.
You're not in the process anymore. And that's so frustrating, and it happens so many times.
I would call all the time to make sure they got them after I went to the UPS store. Literally, I was running down there like every other day for over a year. And I would call and then say, okay, we got everything. Oh, now we need something else. It was constant.
Oh, yeah, it's constant.
It was just, I felt like a rat on a wheel being used to, and I was like, are these people even really going to do any? I was wondering all this because it seemed like just a stall. And then I was thinking about it. I mean, the further it got out there from the hiring the attorneys that went belly up to the two modification people, I wasted like years trying to get this taken care of, and tons of money and time, and still and heartache. Oh my gosh. It's just, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. So I'm hoping our country and how they do the banking in the future is completely set up to be more, like you said, make people, again, people. It reminds me of What's a Wonderful Life with Mr. Potter. That's like, it's true, but the town.
Let's finish up here again on the loan modification. So, as I said, the banks got softer and softer on it, and particularly if you had someone helping you that knew what they were doing. Because if you don't know what you're doing, it frustrates the people in the bank because they're so overworked and they've got so many people that they're trying to deal with. That if you don't do it just bing, 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 just the way
Right.
you're supposed to do it, they'll just say, okay, I don't have time to nursemaid you.
Right.
And a lot of people do that. They don't think it's really that important. Oh, we'll get it there a little bit later. It's not a problem.
So it's very
a
important.
day or two later, I'll get around to it. But that's just death. I mean, it'll just kill you with these kinds of things. So
Yeah.
the key is you got to be consistent, and then sometimes you'll actually get turned down, and you can reapply.
Oh, okay.
And I have a paralegal that works with me, who's gone in as many as 3 times before they finally get the loan modification.
Well, it shows you're persistent and you're not
Well, if
giving
you're
up.
persistent, we've with me with loan modifications, I would say between 90 and 95 and 97% success rate.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
normally, because what we do is we make an analysis of it before you come to us, and it's free, and we look it over and say, well, we think you can do it, or we think you can do it if you could maybe rent out one room in your house, or we'll give you some ideas of
Right.
what you need to do.
Right.
And so that when I take you on, or someone in my firm takes you on, we're already pretty sure we could do it. We just have to get the person that we're dealing with
Right.
to then do what they're supposed to do, get all the documents and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. And it'll work if you have the right legal group to help you. I said there are others. So many of them have been fraudulent. It's just, I would say of all the people that come to me, way more than half have already been taken to the cleaners by somebody else.
Oh, I'm sure. I just with the people that call in on our show and see you on TV that call, most of them have told me they've gone through 2 or 3, like myself, 2 or 3 people trying to resolve the issue.
But aren't really trying to do anything.
And
except
have
take
just
money.
taken their money.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's just it's back to what you were saying. It's the whole core of what's going wrong with our planet is people don't care for each other.
Right.
And because of that, we are all suffering on the planet. And I'm so grateful that you had your experience and you decided to choose the good guy,
You're right.
to be a good
Well,
guy.
let me just kind of finish up here.
Okay.
I think there's a couple more things that people really ought to know.
Oh, okay.
One of them is that quite often people just wait until the foreclosure starts.
Okay.
So then there's a lawsuit that's filed.
Right.
So the important thing there is that you need to have a lawyer file the proper papers in opposition to the foreclosure. If you don't, then they'll just march right along and there's nothing you can do. Recently here, but I think about I think it's 2 years ago, we had a law passed in the state of Hawaii that says if you're in foreclosure and you are in a loan modification mode, the banks cannot go forward at all.
That's what I was told, and I told the other lawyer when we were in court. I said I am in modification. I can prove it. We can subpoena all of the records at the time when this was all going down, and they had stuff every week coming in from me.
Well, I think that might have been before they actually passed the law.
Oh, maybe.
That's the difference now, is we actually have a law.
Oh,
It says, so
okay.
when I go down to court and I make a representation to the judge that you're in a loan modification, the judge will stop everything right then and there.
Right.
Now, he may have to require us to prove, and we'll do that. He'll give us a month and we have to show that we're actually doing it.
Right.
But that's the nice thing about it, is it
Right.
does stop the process now.
Right.
And I don't know how many other states have that same thing going on, but we do have it here.
That's
And,
awesome. That's very, very good for the people.
And so the idea of a loan modification is sometimes it's the very first thing you want to do. Sometimes it's the very last thing you want to do. It just depends on the
Right.
particular situation
Right.
that you find yourself in.
Right. Okay. So everybody's case is going to be different.
Everybody's case is just like fingerprints. Nothing's the same. I mean,
And
everybody.